Hi there everyone, Lars here, from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And today I bring to you the fourth and final part of the Gangs of Erralial, the campaign that I ran with a number of my students a little while back. This has been a fun little adventure for me to go on just because it's great for me to go back to a campaign that I honestly enjoyed and just look at an overall fun story from playing Dungeons and Dragons, and just goes to show once again the strengths and the fun of having multiple people all share in with the story. And that's something that I really hope to communicate with this last part, because really so many of the players brought something fun and unique to this epic conclusion. Now, while it's actually really not the conclusion of the story, this is the conclusion of the campaign, because by the time that we wrapped up these final sessions, school had already come to a close. A number of my students were graduating, and we were right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So all of these different elements essentially brought this campaign to a screeching halt, but the story is still open to continue in some form in the future, and that's something that I would love to do one day, but that's a topic for later on. So let's jump back into the story of the Gangs of Erralial. Now, in the last installment of the Gangs of Erralial, the team had split into two separate parties, with the larger party going underground to try to find the Drow Necromancer who had been plaguing them ever since the murder chair. But instead of finding this Drow Necromancer, they had discovered an incursion of Drow scouts and their servants and slaves preparing a potential invasion of the city of Erralial. They had fought against this group and not just wiped them out, but they had even managed to turn two Drow to their side before the final Drow escaped with her remaining servants. Meanwhile, the two murder hobos of the group had managed to corner, with the help of the city guard, the remaining teenage gang that had been tagging and vandalizing elven neighborhoods, and they had murdered all of them in true murder hobo fashion, which the rest of the party picked up on, because when it was time for everyone to come back together at Finran's toy shop, well, the rest of the party decided to not let them know that they had two Drow in the back room, which is very important because one of them would have definitely tried to murder them just based on principle. So now that the party had two Drow on their side, Noxalrin and Alumini, they decided that they needed to do something with these Drow. So they all got together, and using various spells and everything, and having honest, open conversations with these Drow, discovered that the male Drow had been cursed because he was so in love with his female counterpart that their own goddess had cursed him, but not in the typical fashion of being transformed into some disgusting spider monster as punishment for not loving her enough or for betraying her, but instead that they would share pains and share destiny, and that essentially that their love was doomed to end in some bloody, disgusting manner. Well, that is ample reason enough to turn on their people and even turn on their goddess if given ample opportunity to do so. So Evelios, being the cleric that he was, began to pray for some divine influence, some divine inspiration, and discovered that these Drow weren't just simply coming to prepare for a possible invasion of the city, but that their goddess feared something. That treacherous goddess Lolth had sensed some sort of ripple throughout the planes of existence, that something terrible was coming, and that the point of origin for this ripple was in the city of Erralial. And it was clear that other deities felt the exact same thing, and that behind the scenes, things were beginning to be put into motion to stop whatever this was. It was unclear, but the gods were cognizant of it. And so what this meant is that the party decided, look, we need to now actually turn to some real divine influence. We have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. So we need to go looking for some help. So they decided, let's do some research right here. And Ursula, who had already been going to the library a whole lot to figure out more about this ancient deity of Skull, had done some work and found out that there was indeed a goddess that they could go to combat the powers of Lolth. So the party made their way back into the Temple District, the middle district going up the hill of the city. And there they sought out the Temple of Tamara, a dragon goddess, where they talked with the priests and the priestesses to find out if it was possible to break spells that bound these drow in place. And could these drow be protected if they were to actually be swayed against their people and against their own goddess? To which the people of Tamara said, yeah, bring them on in. It did take a little bit of influencing and everything like that. They were really lucky with their dice rolls and very good with their diplomacy, very good with their role playing. And so the team worked together, once again keeping some of the murder hobos out of the loop so that way they could bring the drow on in, and had them converted to Tamara and made into paladins. Now, this is one of those moments where normally you don't really want the dungeon master to kind of just be playing their own story. And this is an instance where I was like, I feel like I'm kind of hijacking everything right here because I'm doing a lot of the role playing right here. These are kind of my characters now who are getting character development. But what was fun is that all of this character development was initiated and led by the players. And I asked afterwards, like, have I gone a little bit too far right here? And they're like, no, this is awesome. And now we have these powerful paladins and an entire temple on our side. This is amazing. And actually, that would end up being something that saved them in the end. Well, we're going to get to that here in a little bit. But now that they had these drow paladins of Tamara on their side, this now meant that the party was ready to take their findings to the Duke of Erralial. Meanwhile, our murder hobo friends had to be kept busy and distracted by Leo and Lucius, who took them into the city to do some shopping. There they found a really hilarious elderly couple of a dwarf and an orc. The dwarf man who made all these little kinds of silly trinkets, something similar to like what you would find over at a Renaissance fair, while meanwhile his wife actually brought in the real dough by making as much good stuff as you could make with actual dough, like delicious muffins. And so they befriended this elderly couple. They went and they got a plant that Leo made semi-conscious, and a whole bunch of other really, really hilarious little side jinks. It's one of the beautiful things about having a campaign in a city, is that there's so many people in the city, there's so many different little things that you can put on in there that can entice and wow the players. And as you get to know your players a little bit more, you can figure out what kinds of shops, what kind of characters will really engage their characters more. Once again, this is one of the beauties of having a city campaign. Well, once everything was set to meet with the Duke, the entire party finally all got together and presented Nox and Alumini to the Duke and presented their entire story. And the nobility of the city were wowed with just what seemed like an impossibility. Now, they did hold back the information about deities being involved right here, but they used all of their information that they had gathered about a drow necromancer who was running rogue and a possible drow incursion to essentially receive support to go back under the city in order to hunt down this drow necromancer. Now, they did withhold information about the murder rooms because since they didn't yet know what these were, they felt it wasn't quite right the time to let everyone know that there were these cool things underneath the city because they feared that that would lead to a power struggle. With all of this violence and with all this mystery now unfolding within the city of Erralial, the Duke decided it probably would be best to take up a suggestion that had been posed to him by some of his nobles to open up a teleport ring in order to bring in a bunch of Imperial soldiers from the capital in order to secure the city against further violence and now especially against a possible invasion. So the players decide, you know what, this has all been like really good. They presented the drow were accepted. The Temple of Tamara said that these people are now ours and we will watch over them. They are not to be hurt by anyone else, and the Duke accepted this. So it seemed like everything was really good for the players. Now is just time to gather their forces and launch one final expedition against this drow necromancer wherever he might be hiding. In the meantime, Cyrus decided that it was time to make good on his promise to hunt down Hylam the Kidnapper, or the serial killer who had been plaguing the city of Erralial, gathering together various allies that he had made along the way, such as the Foots, and his confidants of mercenaries and murderers, as well as a circus leader and animal tamer. Cyrus now had his own party and went hunting after Hylam. After a couple of sessions of poking around in different areas, using hounds to try to sniff out scents, find new clues, they finally discovered the hideout of a hobbit, halfling, who was living in the lower parts of the city and had a strange brand. This halfling had been going around and eating children, and had been collecting some of their bones as trophies. Well, these bones were held in a very strange container. Not only that, they had a very strange brand on their tongue. This halfling was able, with this strange magical brand, to have greater speed and greater strength than any of the other characters alone. So it took the entire party, destroying an entire apartment complex, to fight against this halfling and finally bring them down. Cyrus had broken himself away from the rest of the party while they went to go rest in order to capture Hylam. Cyrus succeeded, brought this reign of terror to a close, and received a handsome reward. With now his money and his newfound celebrity, Cyrus decided to enjoy himself a little bit, and this is what saved the entire party. Because unbeknownst to them, by making a declaration to the Duke about what they had been up to, they had alerted certain enemies within the Duke's court who were allied with the Drow Necromancer and the Gangs of Erralial, and a massive attack was planned against these troublesome adventurers. By Cyrus returning to the others late, Cyrus got to see this strange gathering of people late at night, way more than what he would have expected within the city. So he kept back to the shadows and watched them. And when he found out that they were getting ready to surround the apartment complex that the party was using, Cyrus snuck in and alerted the party to what was going on before they could be assassinated in their sleep. This gave the party enough time to assemble themselves before an all-out battle began. They fended off the initial wave of assassins, battled their way on out through the front doors, and found themselves suddenly face to face with a small army led by the Drow Necromancer. This time the Drow came prepared for a full battle to the death. And by this fight taking place where it was, right in the middle of the city, right near the temple districts, the Drow was not taking any chances. He had brought a full array of special spellcasters and warriors that allowed him to take on temple leaders face to face. He's blood for blood, and he wanted blood. In a massive battle that soon engulfed the temple district of the city of Erralial, temples were burned, churches were laid low, buildings were blown apart, and heroes and villains died on both sides. In this massive fight, Finran and Avelios kind of took the lead, being the more tanky characters, deciding to go straight for the Necromancer. This probably wasn't the best idea because they were immediately beset on by the Necromancer's own team of adventurers who just pounded them into the dirt and took them already within one round close to death. Meanwhile, the other players who were not so tanky and really weren't necessarily set up for massive combat tried to stay off to the sides. It became this brutal battle of strategy and attrition, a battle in which the party began to lose members. In the middle of the conflict, Leo and Lucius disappeared into the night. Meanwhile, Lucifer finally had his showdown with the last member of that gang, that teenage gang, and he fought him with his chair leg. Oh yeah, but even still, he did not survive. For finally, after surviving so many fights with so many gang members, Lucifer was brought low with a knife to the gut. The party's second murder hobo, Ryu, fell trying to take the necromancer head on, and now with half of the party missing, the remaining players were on the back foot. But that was when their choice to spare 2 drow came back to save them. The drow, with the help of the Temple of Tomorrow, came to rescue their friends. And with the drow's help, especially with a special link between Nox and a purple worm, they are able to decimate a number of the gangsters, and were able then to surround the necromancer and his main party. Suddenly with the tides turning, the villains turned way more desperate, and the battle became even bloodier and crazier. Cyrus and Ursula were both knocked unconscious at several points, but Ursula was able to be saved by her strange connection to the deity of Skull, which unleashed this strange horror upon the battlefield as it began to consume the corpses of the dead. A strange creature that they were never able to quite figure out, because the battle continued to rage as the necromancer began taking control of the other corpses around him, turned them upon the heroes, and even took control of the purple worm, creating this horrible monstrosity from it. The worshippers of Tomorrow, along with the remaining members of the party, were forced back into the temple, which the necromancer blasphemed as he broke his way through. And soon a greater battle ensued, as now not just heroes and magic clashed, but now the powers of death and deity, as the necromancer pulled upon all of his knowledge of death to fight against a goddess of life. And as blood sprayed the stones of the Temple of Tomorrow, as many valiant souls perished, the goddess descended, brought healing to those who had survived, took the drow in her grasp, and drained him of all of his power. Now, weakened, left, cackling and mad, the heroes came to say, "You have anything to tell us, anything at all. Why would you fight us in a situation that would be so hopeless? There's no way that you could have expected to win a massive fight right in the middle of the city, surrounded by enemies." And the drow was like, this isn't the end. Something greater is coming. I am just the beginning. He had nothing more to say, and so they killed him. And with that, the battle was brought to a close. Once again, half of the party either dead or missing. No one knew where. Everyone had been battered down to the last few hit points. Nearly all of their spell slots had been used up. A lot of their items had been used up. This was a fight that I, as the Dungeon Master, had actually intended to be a total party kill. An ominous way to end the campaign. But they had managed to survive against all the odds. And now they knew that something greater, something far darker, was now on the horizon. But what could it be? They didn't exactly know. And once again, because of various circumstances, the campaign came to an end right there. And it was a place that I didn't mind necessarily ending, because the story can be picked up. But now, half of the party's dead or missing, and for many of the others there, their story is sort of coming to a conclusion. Cyrus had already completed all of his goals of hunting down various individuals. Ursula, though, now has something completely different to do. Rather than necessarily fight gangs, discover what on earth is the deity of Skull doing. Meanwhile, Finran survived everything, has received citywide acclaim, and his toy shop is now going to be famous, and people are going to come from all over to buy his wondrous toys. As for Avelios has stopped a great evil, but now knows that there's something bigger coming. everyone kind of has something now ahead of them to do. And where their characters go is a matter of imagination for both me as the Dungeon Master and for the players as well. We'll see what happens within the city of Erralial sometime in the future. But for now, the fight to bring to an end and to bring to justice those who have been murdering innocent people way back at the beginning of this campaign has been completed. The murder chair has been destroyed, and the necromancer who unleashed this murder chair and all of this destruction and devastation upon the city is gone and no more. But something else is coming. And what that will be is once again a matter for the future. For once, rather than turn it on over and be like, hey, so what are things that you writers can learn from this? I have to turn the lens back on myself and ask, okay, well, what did I, Lars, learn from this campaign? Well, once again, I learned the power of shared storytelling. There were plenty of things that I had not expected to do at all in this campaign, but by listening to the input of all of the different players, so many different adventures were had. Adventures that were filled with violence and action, and other adventures that were just filled with sweet characters and wonderful moments and muffins and soup and funny little kids and funny old people. And those are the things that you can explore within your stories. Something that you can definitely learn from playing Dungeons and Dragons is that it's totally okay to have little side moments, have little side quests. It's good to rest and take stock. It's usually in these moments of rest that a lot of great world building and character development is to be had. That's where you can set up great moments that then have payoff in the bigger culminating moments later on in your story. And without that break, it's kind of just breakneck pace throughout the entire story, and that can get exhausting. That's exhausting to write. That's exhausting to read. That's exhausting to experience. You need to have breaks. Dungeons and Dragons can really teach you when to take breaks, and Dungeons and Dragons can really teach you how to ask questions of the characters that you are creating and of your world, in order then to create moments where you can learn more about your story, more about your characters, more about the settings, which are all things that help to bring your story more to life. And that's one of the beautiful things about playing Dungeons and Dragons, is that if you're paying very close attention to how the game is played and to how you can lead the game or play in the game, you can see how worlds come to life. And you can then take those lessons and take those experiences and transform that into your own writing. Another lesson to take away from this game is that stories can go in unexpected directions. And in fact, I have come to learn that sometimes going in those unexpected directions are the best things to do for your stories and lead to some of the most fulfilling chapters that you'll write, or that they'll lead you to characters that you had never before imagined, and those sometimes become your most favorite characters, even sometimes better than your main cast, which then should prompt you to better your main cast of characters because of these new characters that you've discovered along the way. This is one of the beauties of having a discovery session, about letting your story actually live and breathe. As someone who is more of an architect writer, someone who likes to have everything planned out, it's very easy sometimes to be constrained by the framework that I've created for myself. Many times it's actually better to let a story flex its own muscles and become its own thing. And that is where you might discover some of the greatest experiences. And I've definitely experienced that a lot while playing Dungeons and Dragons, because Dungeons and Dragons is a shared storytelling experience. It's something that if you try to railroad it, it will never be as good as if you let it become something that you as the Dungeon Master and you as the players create together. And that's something that cannot be scripted. That's something that is discovered. And in that discovery, you might just find something amazing. And I know that for myself, I definitely have, because now there's so much more I want to do with the city of Erralial. There's so much still to discover, and I can't wait for a chance to get back to the game and explore more with new players and see where the story takes us. And not just where the overall story takes us, but what new characters, what new adventures can be discovered along the way. So that's the experience that I've had playing Dungeons & Dragons. There's plenty of other stories for me to tell, but the next time that I do a D&D story, it will be one that isn't just mine. However, once again, it's been a blast, at least for me, to share with you all the stories of the Gangs of Erralial and the heroes who tried to bring peace to a troubled city. I hope that you've enjoyed this short D&D mini-series, and if you have your own stories of what it's been like to play Dungeons & Dragons, what kind of cool experiences you've had or cool twists within the narrative that you've experienced, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. Thank you for joining us on this adventure, and if you'd like to get more substantial writing advice from us, you can check out our other videos here on YouTube, or even better yet, head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We also have writing challenges for you novice writers over at our Pinterest page, and we would love to have you be a part of our community over at our subreddit and also on our Discord. Links for all of those sites are down in the description, and until the next video, y'all, tschüss.